Welcome to the Q Podcast.
Q is about conversation.
If we're really concerned about ending poverty, we've got to be more concerned about creating justice.
Our cultural products as Christians need to both defy and resonate with the culture.
And God's doing amazing things. His church is expanding, his church is growing.
It's not what's the purpose of my life, it's what is the purpose that's been assigned.
Stay curious, think well, advance good. This is Q.
Welcome to another edition of the Q Podcast. I'm Gabe Lyons and excited about what we're going to hear today because it's one of those rare stories and opportunities where we actually hear people who come from two completely different backgrounds, largely don't understand one another's worlds, and then those worlds collide and you start to see how all of us have the opportunity to grow and learn if we're willing to see kind of beyond the surface of skin color, of class, of ethnicity, of perspective, of economics, and actually see the human being behind it. That story today is going to be one of Tiffany Whittier and Michael Kent. It was one of the great highlights of our Q 2018 event that just took place in Nashville this spring, and it was one of those where people were in tears as they listened to this story play out. We interviewed the two of them. And I don't want to give the whole thing away. I want you to just hear kind of how it unfolds. But the setting and the context for this story is that Tiffany was a probation officer who worked in Arizona for over 12 years. And she got assigned to Michael, who is sitting here on stage with her now at Q. And Michael would have described himself as a neo-Nazi, a racist. He owned that. He was happy with who he was. And then Tiffany walks into his life. And so I want you to hear as Sho Baraka interviews Tiffany and Michael, and we hear their story unfold.
The first question I wanted to ask you, Michael, is I don't have a whole lot of white supremacist friends, but are those who claim to be many. How did you come into being a skinhead? Like, how did that happen for you?
Well, it started when I was a young kid. Our family was living in Colorado, and we moved to Pennsylvania, it was a predominantly black neighborhood. And we were one of the only white families there. And we got picked on because we didn't act like them, we didn't talk like them, we were just different. And then about 6 years old, we moved to another place out of the projects into Pennsylvania again. And a kid broke out of a group home, African-American kid broke out of a group home, broke into our house and tried to rape my mother. No good, something a 6-year-old shouldn't see. And then at the age of 12, I finally got me a black friend, and we were friends, thick as thieves, good as you can be. He invited me over to his house, introduced me to his mom to meet me, and the first thing his mother said is, "I don't want that blue-eyed devil in my house." And that was the first encounter with racism I ever had. I never knew what it was before until that day.
And so from that point, did you just make the decision that I just can't interact with black folks? Or?
Well, that day I started searching out for people like me that got bullied by other races and weren't accepted there. So the way I was looking, if you ain't gonna like me, I'm not gonna like you guys. And from that day on, I started actively searching for white supremacist groups, neo-Nazi groups, everybody that was against the African-American culture, because if you don't like me, I ain't gonna like you.
Got you. So Tiffany, when you first got the case, what was your thoughts? Like, was it just like, oh, it's another case? Or did you have any kind of trepidation? Like, what was your experience like when you first came into encounter with Michael?
When I first got his case, I reviewed it. I saw his tattoos, the hate tattoos, but I didn't judge. I just knew I had to go out and work with this person, interact with him, and try to make him a better person from the first time I met with him.
Yeah. Well, the story is amazing. So you had all these tattoos. In the video, the ABC News, they show you getting those tattoos removed, which is very painful.
Yes.
What was the transition? Like, what made you decide, like, you know what? I am going to leave this life of hatred and racism and to pursue somewhat of a reconciliation and truth?
Because for once in my life, I realized that people of color do believe in good. She seen good in me. She gave me a chance. She gave me a second chance. Benefit of the doubt when a lot of my own people didn't give me the benefit of the doubt and didn't believe me. She showed up at my doorstep and knowing what the odds were. She came here, she opened her heart. From that day on, our relationship started growing, and she's been an inspiration to me and helping me get rid of all this hate. It's easier to love than to hate. Hating takes so much time and energy.
Yeah. So what were your thoughts while you were watching this transition and this process happen?
Well, it didn't happen immediately. As the enforcer, it didn't. It's something that took place over time.
Yeah.
As I worked with him, I had asked him, and he brought this to my attention not too long ago, well, actually after being his probation officer, I said to him jokingly, hey, take down the hate flags, put up some smiley faces, and you'll have a positive day. You'll start out your day positive. And over time, he took down the hate flags. He just interacted with me, with other people in the community. And it was a blessing to see the change.
So I'm sure these decisions didn't go over well, especially in the circles that you were moving in. What were some of the things that you faced, or what were some of the fears that you may have had, or maybe still experience, in this transition?
Well, I moved out to Colorado, like I said, just to get my life together, start a new life, new beginning, get away with everything, and be able to live my life for me. And then ABC aired this story. Since they aired this story, I can't go back to Arizona now for at least a long while and see my kids. So in order for me to see my children, they have to fly out to see me. It's seen them twice in a year and a half. So it was an ultimate sacrifice that I made to give up this hate. But in the long run, it's better in my children's lives because they're not able to see what I used to be. They're able to see me for who I am now.
Amen. Amen. Beautiful. So, similar to you, Tiffany, I'm sure everybody in the office probably thought, "Girl, you're doing way too much." Like, what were some of the messaging that was coming towards you as you were kind of going out your way to help Michael?
I wouldn't say I was going out of my way.
Gotcha.
I'm being me.
Yeah.
And I feel like I treat all my clients, my defendants, equally.
Yeah.
I learn to listen, have that conversation with them. It's a two-way street. Let them know me, but at the same time, I need to get to know them. See where they're coming from.
Yeah.
What are their concerns? What are the problems they're having? Get to know their family.
Yeah.
And have that communication. The communication is key.
Yeah.
But for me, I didn't have any feedback from my coworkers saying, what are you doing going out there? Because there's others that are out there too that have problems.
Your job is just to make sure that he doesn't commit any more crimes. So you could have just did that, like, hey, just check in on him, make sure he's not doing drugs, make sure you're not.
Right.
But you actually cared about him as a person. Like, why was that? Like, you cared about the dignity of him. And
she was too stubborn.
I care about people.
Yeah.
That's just generally in my heart, to care about people and want to see people succeed and become better people than when they first walked into my office.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. So.
Thank you.
While you guys are busy changing the world, I don't know if you know, like, there's a lot of division in society. What are some encouragements that you would personally give to people out there who are wrestling with or who are struggling with, how do I identify, how do I cross these cultural differences? How do I engage with people who are different from me? What would you say, to those folks?
For me, the number one thing I've learned through this whole experience and everything, racism and hatred is a cancer. It's spreading throughout this country and throughout the world. But together as one, coming together, we can be the cure for this cancer.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
And I would say for me is asking questions, communication. For me, I love going to outside of my comfort zones. It's hard, But at the same time, I'm not going to know the answers or make that change unless I can be that leader and go to someone and say, you know what, I'm curious. Can you tell me why you think this way?
Yeah. So, Michael, what are some things you're doing now, like to spread this message? I know you were talking about some things you're passionate about and who you think should hear this message.
Well, for the most part, I want to target a lot of the youth because it starts with our kids. Because, like with me, I was a kid and very impressionable. I judged a whole race for one person's actions. And, that's still going on still to this day. We got to change the minds of our youth and form them to be responsible young adults. But ultimately, it comes up to us, the people in this room and people everywhere. We need to help our youth. If we don't change it and we don't change their way of thinking, it's not going to change. So we need to help our youth.
So this is the litmus, Tiffany. Is Michael invited to the family picnic? She
was at my wedding.
Oh, come on, turn up.
She was absolutely, and trust you me, she got dirty looks, but she was family.
So you got to come to the family reunion and do the electric slide with Tiffany.
She's never invited me.
There we go. We're changing lives right here at Q Conference. Y'all give it up for Michael and Tiffany.
Thank you.
God bless. God bless.
Thank you so much.
Well, I hope you enjoyed hearing this story. I know it could go on, and there is a much longer story even than we were able to hear at Q. But man, it just stood out to me hearing this discussion and hearing him talk about Tiffany, how she saw the good in me. She gave me a second chance. She showed up at my doorstep and opened her heart. And it always seems like in these conversations, there's always somebody who takes that first risk, who says, I'm going to take a major risk. I don't know what the reaction will be. I don't know if they'll respond well, but I'm going to put myself out there. And in doing so, it sort of invites a new conversation. It invites a relationship. It invites people to actually come together and start to see one another differently than just the veils that we can sometimes put up in our lives. And so I hope this story is one of those that you want to share with your friends. Invite them to come back and listen to this particular episode of the Q podcast that they can find on iTunes or wherever they listen to podcasts. And this story, along with so many others at Q, are meant to give us hope, are meant to give us a sense of what is possible when we start to bring people together instead of dividing people. And in our culture today, there's so much about what separates us, so much about what divides us. There's a lot of news stories, there's a lot of headlines, there's a lot of discussion and fodder that could keep us divided. But there's enough stories like this one of Michael and Tiffany that I hope it encourages you that there's more possible. There's a better way. The world's dying to hear and understand and see modeled what it can look like to get along, to accept people who are different than us, who have different viewpoints, who've come from different historical backgrounds, who have strong opinions that you actually disagree with. But could you possibly still be friends? Well, the answer is yes, absolutely. And so if you want to see this talk and watch in person the emotion, the conversation that was taking place, you can do that at qideas.org. But I will tell you, when I talked with Michael at the end of the event, it was amazing to hear him. He hadn't been in a lot of environments that felt kind of like church or like Christians kind of all hanging out. That's not the space that he usually is operating in or spends time in. And he was just overwhelmed and touched by the kindness, the love, the way people treated him, the way he felt embraced, the way he felt like he was hearing, even through the other talks that were happening at Q, just the way that God works and how he's constantly pursuing people and loves them enough to go to all kinds of extreme ends to reach them. And so for him, it was being reached through his probation officer, reaching out and extending love and kindness in a way he had never experienced. And for you and for your friends, it might be something else that God's using. But just be encouraged. God's at work. He's constantly redeeming relationships, bringing people together. But it takes some of us being willing to risk, have courage, be brave, step out, do the hard thing, do the thing that feels awkward maybe, but it might just be the thing that breaks through to another human being who needs it in that moment. Well, I hope you have a wonderful week as you move into the next few days. I want to remind you that coming up, we're having a great conversation called Q&A. It's our summer session on gender equality in the church. That's going to be next week. Keep an eye out for the details on the timing of that, but we'd love for you to join us and ask your questions as we together hear that talk that took place at Q, one of the top-rated talks at Q 2018, and we'll look forward to having that discussion with you involved next week. So hope you have a great week and looking forward to the conversation on the next podcast.